welcome to Worried About Nothing. Today we're going to talk about living from the heart versus from the head. And we thought it's a very relevant topic to the recent times, and we'll explore a little bit more about it. My name is Katya.
And I'm Kim.
And I'm Danielle. I'll start since I kind of wanted to do this topic today. And I just thought it would be a good thing for us to explore, since it kind of came up on our last episode, to understand a little bit more about what living from the heart looks like or feels like. And maybe we can talk about how to get from our head into our hearts.
Yeah, I think it's a very relevant topic, and it's a good one, because I believe that, just speaking from my own experience, I was raised to live in the head. So I was raised to use the mind to think things through and work things out and intellectualize things and process things. And I think in today's society, that's very common. And it seems to be a kind of default position that people often will go to. You know, if there's anything that they're not sure about or don't understand or that frightens them, they'll jump to the head and try and intellectualize things and try and make sense out of everything. So I've lived a number of years, most of my life, in the head, even though I didn't realize. So I think the confusing thing can sometimes be, or for me, was that I felt things, and so I thought that the heart was open. But just because I felt things didn't mean that my heart was open. I believe that you can still feel things with a closed heart, or even if the heart's slightly open, but you're mainly in your head. And in recent times, it's almost like that balance is flipped. So I feel like I'm more in the heart now than in the head. And having that change, I can see that what I thought was being heart open or feeling things in the past really wasn't at all. It's a completely different perspective. It's a different dynamic. So in some ways, I'm grateful that I've been able to see the difference, because I don't think everyone always has that opportunity to. But for me, I feel that it's kind of hard to put into words, but living from the heart or coming from the heart is so different to the head, in that it's all about true knowing. And instead of kind of clinically observing, in some ways, you're participating and feeling, but you can also do that without getting caught up in all the feeling. To me, coming from the heart or experiencing life through the heart feels like everything is sacred, everything is love, everything is oneness, everything's the same. So it's not even having to intellectualize choice. You know, so in the mind, you could decide to accept something or rationalize something before deciding that's the right thing. Whereas when coming from the heart, you just know it's the right thing. It's very, very different. There's no thought. And there's much more of an intimacy, a closeness. So it's like you're living life rather than observing life. You're experiencing everything as opposed to working it out or watching it. And it makes everything much closer and much more immediate. Because intellectualizing puts a distance up. It immediately creates a separation between you and whatever you're thinking about or looking at or analyzing or observing or whatever you're doing. Whereas living from the heart, you're one with it. So there's no separation. And so choices are made from love as opposed to from rational pros and cons or reasons why something should or shouldn't be. It's almost like an instinctive, there's no thought behind it. So it's just moving with the heart. And it's a much faster process, not even a process, it's just much faster, because there's no aversion or attraction. There's no thinking things through. It's just you move with it. It's hard to explain. I'm not explaining well.
No, I think I'm understanding what you're saying. And one of the things that I know for myself that comes up is the mind going, why, right? So maybe I could be in a place of living from the heart, but then the heart's like, okay, well, I want to do this. And the mind goes, well, why? Like, why? Like, where is this coming from? What's the reason why you want to do this? Because I can be very, very over analytical of all of the different things, especially following like a spiritual path. I'm like, well, is this a true desire? Why do I want to do this? Is this coming from my ego, or is it coming from the heart? And so with already having a very analytical mind, it kind of, hamstrings me further. I get a little bit more stuck because I'm like, well, why? Where is this coming from? And with the heart, often I don't think there's a reason. I don't know how much I can really speak to that, because I don't know how frequently I am in the heart or when things are actually coming from the heart. But I imagine a lot of the time there's no reason. Is that your experience?
Yeah, the why and the what and the where and the who seems to disappear. So there's no reasoning, there's no rationalization, there's no having to have a story or some path or some timeline. It's moving with it. There's no thought. So, for example, if I were in the mind and I saw somebody had fallen down and they were crying in the street, my mind might go, oh, should I go and comfort them? Should I help them? Should I do anything? I don't know them. They might not react well. They might not want a stranger helping them. They might, or maybe I should leave them alone. But if in the heart, you just go to them and you help them, you miss out on all that chatter.
Sounds nice. Really, really nice break for me.
I feel like it's a surrender to the heart, and with surrender to the heart, the mind works with it as opposed to against it, or as a separate beingness or a separate entity. So Jason speaks of this in some of his videos, about how you can build such a fortress around the mind that the connection to the heart is cut off. And then once that fortress comes down, the mind is then free to work as the servant to the heart as opposed to the other way around, which is the kind of the more natural way of being. So the heart is in charge and the mind just does what the heart directs in some ways. So it's very much when thought is needed, the mind will scurry off and do what the heart tells it to do, kind of thing, as opposed to the mind trying to work things out, completely ignoring the heart. Or at least that feels like my experience, and it's so much easier as well, because everything makes sense without having to have an explanation. It just feels right.
I love that. That's so beautiful.
I remember having lots of questions. Why this? Why that? And I remember asking my mind the same question. Why do you need to know? How important is it to you? That was helping.
Yeah, and it's funny when you ask your mind that question. I've done that in the past too, because it can't come up with an answer because there isn't one. So it scurries around like a hamster for, hours and sometimes days.
But I need to know. Shut up, mind. Do you really? How is it going to help you?
Well, I was thinking for myself, a lot of times if I ask myself why I need to know, which I could probably do a lot more often, but if it tends to have to do with something with other people, it comes back to, this concept of being separate and not wanting to hurt other people, which I'm actually finding kind of interesting right now, because when your heart is open, it kind of like takes away that separation. You have more of that feeling of oneness, of wholeness, and of that everybody else is whole as well. And then that doesn't exist anymore, this fear of hurting someone or causing someone else's pain. So it kind of shows me just exactly how stuck I am, or how far deep maybe into my mind I am in that, that's the thought pattern that comes up when I say why, why, I guess, why do you need to know, or why are you worried about this? Like, where's that coming from?
Yeah, I feel that when you meet somebody from the heart, and you can feel that as well when you're connecting with somebody, it's almost like a heart-to-heart connection. You feel that, and in some ways it takes away the need for words, but obviously people like to communicate with words. But going to what you were saying about not wanting to hurt people or affect them in any way, for me, coming from the heart, I find that it's impossible for me to hurt people, because in the heart it's just love. So you're loving somebody and their reaction has nothing to do with you. So they may react in a hurt way, they may react in an offended way, they may react however they do, but in the heart, it's not anything, you can't hurt them, because you're meeting them as love and they're meeting you as, well, they are love. So any reaction is kind of on the surface and it's almost irrelevant somehow, if that makes sense. I don't know if it does, but that's what I'm experiencing.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I don't know how much sense it'll make to maybe people listening if they're not as, I don't know, aware of kind of how certain things function. Because we've been doing this, I've been doing this for 5 years now, at least with Aratima specifically. So we might have a little bit of some grasp or context or understanding of the way that you're expressing what's happening that maybe other people don't. But I think it's helpful to put out there, because even if it's not making sense to people auditorily and mentally, maybe that's almost better, because they're going to get it on a different level. It'll go in somewhere else. And I can tell when you're speaking about it, for me, like that's been my experience, and it feels very true. So at least, they're getting that from it. So I'm eating on the heart level, even if they don't know it.
But I feel that people do. They just aren't always necessarily aware of it, or they might have moments of it. Because I feel that being in the heart is where you appreciate beauty. So everyone can appreciate beauty in some form or another, and to varying levels. But for me, it feels like, if you're standing in a beautiful forest and the sun's pouring through the leaves and everything's green, your heart is open. It can't not be, or if you're standing on a beach and you're just watching the waves coming through and the sun shining, your heart is open. So I feel that everyone's experienced it, everyone knows it, and everyone has an awareness to a degree of, or to varying degrees of, what it means, because people do seek out beauty. People go to nature to relax. People yearn for beauty. So people, whether they're aware of it or not, are seeking the heart opening. They're seeking love in whatever form, So what we're speaking of, the words don't matter. It's the feeling of it. And I feel that everyone is aware of the feeling, whether they are aware of the lack of the feeling because they've experienced it occasionally, or whether they are aware of it because they experience it all the time, but don't have the words for it, or whatever it might be. It doesn't matter. But I feel that everyone has had some experience, at least once, at least a few times, I'd say. And you feel it. I mean, everyone's loved somebody or something in their lives. And to love, you have to open your heart. There has to be some sort of heart opening, and I feel that with loving, or with feeling love for somebody or something, you can talk about the different levels of love. You can talk about spiritual love, divine love, human love, all those things. But all of them on some level will have some heart opening. Otherwise, you won't feel love, what you believe is love. And whether that love is corrupted by concepts or ideas you have, will affect how true it is. But love is love, so whether you're getting a beautiful crystal clear waterfall of it, or a little trickly dirty stream of it, it's in essence, it's still the same. So in essence, if you feel love, there's going to be some heart activity. I feel.
I was just thinking, what if it's like a stagnant algae filled pond? No. It's just another image that I got when you were describing the different ones. Yeah, no, thank you.
I also wanted to add that sometimes suffering can lead to feeling your heart too, and being in your heart. Just drawing from my own example, I remember being in such a suffering and experiencing the pain in the heart. It was extremely painful. I can actually feel it. And being with that pain, and I remember it was an event that happened in my life, and I've been with that pain for about 3 days. I remember crying and everything, but just having that experience and not running away from it, I think really helped me, because it's just so overwhelming and you're still present with that pain. So yeah, I would say that's an experience of love too, because you're just being with that.
Yeah, that's true. It's good. It's a good point. For me, love is acceptance of everything that is. It is what it is. It's giving up the fight against it. It's kind of closing the heart and pushing things away are the opposite of love and open-heartedness. So as you say, sometimes it's feeling all the feelings so strongly without denying them, without trying to change them, without trying to explain them, without trying to push them away, and just feeling them, even if they're painful. Yes, that can be definitely heart-opening and love, I feel.
And one of the more beautiful moments that I experienced in my life is actually having a silent mind, where you really don't need to overthink and to constantly be in the wheel of thoughts. But just being there, as you said before, Kim, having the true connections and not even having any words. You don't need to have them. That true connection is one of the more beautiful experiences that I definitely had.
Yeah, definitely. And with the silent mind, when that happens, it feels like coming home, and it just is what it's meant to be, and it is what it's meant to be. And it kind of throws into contrast how busy the mind can sometimes be without you being aware of it. the thousands and thousands of thoughts that can scurry through the mind that are really pointless. And being in the heart stills those or makes them very, very muffled. But I remember for most of my life having the busy mind. It was constantly going. So it was, every moment was, oh, what about this? And how about that? And should I do this? What will this affect? And how will that do? And all this kind of stuff. And the entire day was filled with that. And I'm sure the night was as well, because at night I was probably going, well, let me think about what I thought about that, kind of thing. And it's exhausting because it is like a hamster on a wheel. It absolutely has no purpose. It doesn't take you anywhere. Just going round and round and round, usually in the same circle of thought, mind trap, or whatever you want to call it. For me, it feels like when you're in the heart, the mind seems to know its place or know its purpose, and it just stops, or it just gives over control, I suppose, to the heart. And it's almost a sense of relief. It kind of goes, oh, thank God, I don't have to think. I'm not very good at this, so I'm just going to give it over. It's like a dog, if you give control to a dog and it tries to take over the household, and once you train it or, have authority over it, in some ways dogs are really relieved that they don't have to run things they don't understand.
But it's a good point. It has such a relief feeling when you let go of something, because you've tried it from every possible perspective and it didn't get you anywhere. It just gets you back to the same point where you were, and then you're ready to think the same things again or in a similar fashion. So just having this, okay, that's too much, and just letting it all go. It's like, I don't really care about it. Like, it's easy to say to let go, but basically not wanting to know, not finding the way, not finding the answer, and just letting it be. To me, that's letting it go.
Yeah. You don't care either way, and it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. It's got nothing to do with you anymore, and it's just, whatever. It's like whatever your neighbor's doing in their bedroom next door, you don't want to know. You don't need to know.
That's a good example.
And thinking about it will drive you crazy because you'll never know. And you might feel a bit like a pervert as well. It's like, oh, dear. But I guess in a way it's true. It's like the mind trying to work things out. It's got no place there. It's like looking in somebody's bedroom. No. But it is, that's one of the definitions of insanity as well, isn't it? Of just trying to do the same thing over and over and over and expecting different results. And that's what the mind does. It goes, okay, I'm going to think this through. Okay, I'm back where I started. I'll do it again.
Here, let's think about this again. Somehow something new is going to come up and automatically I'm going to know.
Yeah, it's funny.
And it's funny that the same thought can come up the next day, the next morning. You already thought it through. You already have the answer, and then you have to rethink it again. It's like to confirm something.
Yeah, right. I'm doubting what I came up with. Not only now do I have the answer, but now I'm doubting the answer. So now I have to think about it again.
And you watch yourself doing this and you're like, what the hell?
Oh, God. It is torture.
It is, though. It is torture. Absolutely is torture. Self-torture. So stop torturing yourself and just get out of your mind.
Yeah, so since we're there now, maybe we could talk about things we can do when we notice that we're in our minds. I'll go first, even though I don't feel like a lot of the time, like especially recently, I feel like I'm kind of having a tough time with this. But for me, if I focus physically, like try to put my attention lower than in my head, because I can notice when I'm thinking my attention's kind of like up above my head or like out somewhere, like it doesn't feel like it's physically with my body. So that if I put my attention somewhere in my body, and I usually try to either aim for the heart or lower, because it was like, even if I overshoot the heart in a kind of locational aspect, I feel like it's better than being outside of the body or up near the head. So I try to just bring my attention maybe to my feet even, and, try to kind of keep myself or my attention, my awareness within my physicality so that it's not running off and finding thoughts. That's one of the things that I found to be somewhat successful. Depending on the state that I'm in and how whipped up the mind is. But that's one of the things that I've found can be helpful.
That's interesting. I've not tried that. For me, it's not about a point in the body so much. I'm trying to think whether that's true, or at least not consciously that I'm aware of. For me, it's more of a stillness. So if the mind is chattering and I'm paying attention to it, it feels very busy and very uncomfortable and a little bit kind of jagged and like commuter time on the train kind of thing, too many people rushing around. And it feels unnatural now, if it kind of feels strange. For me, I know if I feel that I'm in stillness or if I'm feeling aligned or I'm feeling at peace, it's more of that kind of sensation. The mind can still chatter if it wants to occasionally, or if it is, I'm not really paying attention to it. It's more of an attention. So no, that doesn't make, I've just contradicted myself. Damn it. Yeah, it's hard to explain. I guess it's maybe that it's a feeling, sensation, maybe. I don't know. It's not something I've really thought about, to be honest, but it's good to bring up because it's good to look at, I guess. I guess it's about a connection. So if I'm feeling disconnected or I'm looking at somebody else as other, then I think that is an indicator for me that I'm in the mind or the heart is not open. Whereas recently it's been pretty much all the time that I feel that everybody's one, everyone, it's all oneness. So everyone's part of me. I'm them, they are me. So there isn't that separation. And there's just that love. And it's not a kind of, oh my God, I love you ecstasy kind of thing. It's just this really deep, abiding love that I guess tells me that the heart is open and that's where I'm living. That was very roundabout, but there you go.
See, I had a very unusual experience that really helped me, and it was location related. So it has happened after the first retreat that we all went to. And I had this little Shakti burning in my heart. So it was like a little candle constantly burning almost of the time. It would definitely come back quite often throughout the day. And this is how I automatically would switch my attention to the heart. So in a way, it's the nature that helped me. So because it was burning, you kind of, it's there, but the moment it's burning, I was always putting my attention on the heart. So I think that's what really helped me. But again, it's not the experience that happens for everyone. That's something that happened to me, and to me it did help me. And then at some point it just stopped burning. And I was like, what am I going to do now? Where am I going to give my attention? I love that burning. Come back. I need it. So I can always have my attention on my heart. But I guess things had to move and things change. They don't stay there forever. So, but it really helped me in that sense. And it was, as you say, Danielle, related to a location, specific location.
There's that thing of you see something until you become it and then you don't see it anymore. So there was some kind of integration that happened there.
Absolutely. I'm 100% agreeing with that, because until you become it, once you become it, you can't really explain it. It's like never happened. And it's like, I would say, no, not love. I don't even know what it is, right? But once it's there, you don't even think about it. You don't even explain it. It's just there.
Yeah. It's like you don't go, oh my God, my right hand. I have a right hand. Look, my right hand. It's just there.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I feel like, you were saying, Katya, that it's not everyone's experience, but I feel it's useful to talk about our experiences, because even though people might not be able to relate directly, it may or may not be helpful, or it may or may not be interesting. And in some way, it may or may not have a reaction.
Could open something up. The way that each of us explains our experiences, or like one thing, like the way you say it, even if it's not necessarily what your experience was, or you don't feel like you conveyed it perfectly, that might just trigger something in someone and be like, yeah, I actually know exactly what you're talking about. And it could be true for them. So
yeah, that's true.
I was thinking though, I was like, can we use the mind to help us to get into our hearts? Because for me, at least at the beginning of doing spiritual type work, contemplation, I always found to be a very interesting thing, like to kind of feel yourself into different states of being, using the mind to say, what would it feel like to be in my heart? And kind of feel into that, or what would it feel like to be completely still? Like sometimes those things have worked for me in the past, and I could kind of it feels like a contemplation because I'm contemplating silence or contemplating being in the heart and kind of finding my way some way to those states. Because I believe inside, like if we can ask the questions, we kind of already have the answers to them. So you can just ask it and then see without trying to answer from the mind where it takes you.
Mm-hmm. And that's beautiful. It might help some of our listeners too, because at the beginning, you always use your mind. You always use your mind until, as you say, Kim, you become it. So, yeah, that's a beautiful approach. Do you have, Danielle?
Yeah, I had actually forgotten about it because I was doing it for a while, you know, because I used to ask myself all the time, what does it feel like to be awake? What is that like? And I kind of like sip that a little bit and then get scared because you know how that goes sometimes on the spiritual journey. You really want something, but at the same time, for some reason, you're afraid of it.
Mm-hmm.
That fear arises because you get to the point of the end of the line of what the mind can understand. And then the next step is the drop off, you know, so that's why the fear happens, because the mind can only understand so much. So using the mind to have that feeling of being in the heart, it will kind of take you so far, but because the mind can't understand what it's like being in the heart, you'll get to that kind of end of the line, because the mind's amazing, it's inventive, and it can copy everything, but it doesn't really understand anything outside of its understanding. Will then bring up fear because it's the unknown. And I feel that for me, the unknown is where you need to go. So it's kind of, you have to step past the end of the line of the mind and step into the unknown, because that's where everything happens. That's where everything is. So it's great. It, like you said, and like Katya said, it's good for those who may not have experienced this. It's good for them to start at that point, and then the letting go happens, and then the magical kingdom is beyond then, or whatever you want to call it. But I think sometimes that can be an issue in that, not what you do, but just, you know, generally you sometimes see in people that they try and create things from the safety of the mind. And I've done this in the past, you know, so in past relationships where I've believed that I've been in love, I haven't, but at the time I've believed I have, because I've fabricated some kind of story that fits in with what I want to happen, or some kind of comfort zone where it's safe to, in inverted commas, be in love, which I wasn't, but I can be in love in the parameters of the story my mind has made up, because it's safe and I can predict everything that's going to happen, you know, rather than letting myself fall out of that, or fall out of the mind into actually falling in love, into the unknown. I was staying in that kind of that cage of safety, and looking back with hindsight, sort of picking people that I would be able to do this with, you know, that I wouldn't fall in love with, or there would be no danger of any of that happening, you know, no danger of the unknown happening. And in the mind, you know, it can make up, my experience, it can make up this whole romantic story, this feeling of love, this all of this, which isn't true and isn't real, but it just does it to carry out some kind of suffering, in my experience, some kind of suffering. So playing out externally some of the stories I had about myself, you know, so whether it was the unworthiness stories or whatever it was, the mind created this incredible world that was very, very detailed, very colorful, that was really not true and wasn't in the remotest sense love. But, you know, my mind convinced itself that it was. So the mind can do that too. I think for people, including myself back then, who want to stay in the safety zone, it can fabricate amazing replicas of things that are real, but create them in such a way that you are still in control. And, you know, as long as you're still in control, you're not letting go and you're not experiencing the real thing. So like Katya was saying earlier, letting go is not caring anymore, not holding on to any outcome or anything like that. So people can sometimes live. I mean, I could have very easily continued living my life that way, believing that I loved. And I mean, there was a form of love, but it wasn't real love. It wasn't a true heart open love. And in that state, that's when people are constantly seeking for love, you know, looking for it from other people externally, because it's not within. They're not tapping into what's within. Whereas in my experience, when the heart is open and you feel love, because everything is love, there's no need to seek for it. You know, you are love. You feel it for everyone. Everyone is love. So there's no lacking in love, because everything's love. You know, it's like a superabundance of love, as opposed to a loveless life, which being in the mind is really, I feel. or in my experience is.
I was just kind of really thinking about how that it makes a lot of sense what you were saying with living from the mind being a loveless experience, because love is really experienced in the heart. And if we're in our minds, then we're not in the heart, because we can kind of only do one or the other. So it just kind of brought to awareness or deepened something that I just felt like it did something within me. Like I was like, oh yeah, like that, it really like hit something, like struck a chord with me. It was like that really feels true. And it's like I didn't quite see it that way, or I didn't put words to it that feel quite as real. Like it feels really real and deep and kind of like, wow, it's like living a life without love by staying in the head. It's also the whole like thing of control and wanting to stay safe, and it can be quite boring, you know. Because who wants to be in control of everything? Then you kind of really know what's going to happen next, and that can be very boring and the opposite of life, really, you know, because life is free and kind of anything can happen. And if you're in control, then you pretty much know, or you know all of the possibilities of what could happen. And it doesn't really feel like life. If you've had the experience of what feeling really alive feels like, it's not the same as whatever that is, which probably feels more like death, or a slow death, or waiting for death. All things that sound so lovely.
I had a recent experience, a long-standing pattern control coming up recently, and it didn't feel pleasant at all. You just, from the morning, you're trying to do everything around that control, and then you try to make all your decisions based on that idea that you have to control, and it's definitely not living your life, and it's exhausting. And at some point I was like, I can't do this anymore. I just have to let it go. I just can't do that, because everything is built around it. Everything, your decisions, your choices. So letting it go was much, much freer for sure. It opens up other possibilities.
You know, if we could find a way to actually bring this in, I'm just going to say something about animals and how I feel like they can teach us love. Just because, like, I know when I was living with dogs, they just love so unconditionally, and it's just so in the moment, right? They're not planning anything. They see a squirrel, they want to chase it. They see a stick, you know, they want you to throw it. So I was just thinking about that, because I took a walk with my parents yesterday, and our neighbors have a dog, and you know, I just see them and I'm like, wow, you know, they're just living life very in the moment. And I think because they're so loving, or at least maybe we project onto them that they're loving, but that it can really open something up within me. At least I've had that experience of being like, wow, this animal just, you know, seems so happy and just really happy to see you, and just kind of have that nice feeling of, wow, didn't know I could experience that, because I didn't grow up with dogs. But yeah, I don't know, it was just kind of cool, and it's really interesting to learn kind of about our own natures through the nature, other parts of nature that we have around us.
I think it's true, because animals don't have that. I mean, they have minds, but they don't overthink stuff. There's no kind of running around in hamster wheels of the mind with them. They act instinctively, or they just act as they act. And I believe that they can open people's hearts, their owners' hearts, or other people's hearts, because when you're with an animal, there's no mind, there's no judgment, there's no, even though people do sometimes anthropomorphize them, there isn't any analytical thought there. So it's very easy to meet from the heart, because it's just a heart-to-heart meeting. And they do, I believe they love, they know how to love, they show love. You know, because people do say that they just come to you if they want food or they want warmth or whatever it is. But I feel they come to you for affection, they come to you for cuddles. And we're talking about cats, they're great for letting go of control, or having to let go of control, because there's no way you can ever control a cat. They will do exactly as it wants at all times. You know?
Or teaching acceptance too. Like, the cat does not want to be hugged right now, all right? I won't be hugging the cat.
There is no way you'll be hugging this cat. It's only 5 times its size and it's got 16 legs, you know.
Although we've taught some of the cats the opposite. My husband would grab it and the cat wouldn't want to be there. He would still hold the cat until the cat would let it go, the resistance, and would stay. So I think we train cats like that. It's like, what are you doing? It's like, I'm hugging the cat.
Must dominate cat.
And eventually they just stay there. The black cats learn how to stay on her back with legs up. I was training my cat when he was a little boy. He was biting me, so I would scream like crazy. And he was terrified of the sound, so he stopped doing it. So next time, we're going to talk about pets. So any of our listeners who are interested in pets and soul reading of the pets, please tune in for the next podcast.
If you're interested in hearing more about what we think about what true love really is, we've done a podcast on that. We also have a podcast that covered surrender and letting go, if you'd like to hear a little bit more on that.
Well, thank you for joining us today in our conversation talking about being in your heart instead of your head. Please subscribe and like us, and we'll see you next time. Bye.